Welcome to the Thrive Careers Podcast, the show that helps you move your career confusion to career success, hosted by the extraordinary Olajumoke Fatoki. Each episode is packed with expert insights, real-life stories, and practical strategies to help you land your dream job, level up, and build a career you love. No more guesswork, just clear, actionable steps to help you thrive. If you're ready, let's jump right into it. All right. Welcome everyone to this week's episode of the Thrive Careers Podcast. My name is Olajumoke Fatoki, and today we are in for a treat. Joining me is Therese Miklo, a dynamic leadership consultant and the co-author of the book, The Facilitation Advantage. Therese has over 2 decades of experience transforming leadership pipelines for global brands. Get ready to uncover how you can lead, inspire, and thrive, even when you're not officially in charge. Let's dive in. Hi, Therese. Welcome to the Thrive Careers Podcast. We are so excited to have you.
Me too. I'm excited for this conversation.
Fantastic. To get us started, could you share a little bit about your journey into leadership development and what inspired you to focus on this space?
Sure. Well, my story starts actually when I was 13 years old, and I had kind of the unfortunate life experience of my father passing away rather unexpectedly, left my mom with 3 teenagers to raise. I was the middle child, which is never the easiest child to raise. Anyway, we had to all get jobs. And one of my jobs was to work in a library. And at the time that I was working in a library and I would come home from my job and my mom would come home, I would recognize how hard of a day she had. And it wasn't even necessarily the work itself, but it was the work environment, the kinds of supervisors that she had that weren't clear or weren't supportive or didn't give good direction or were unfair, all the bad things that sometimes supervisors can be. And so I had this fortune to, be able to slip away into the library, and that's where I found in the career section this kind of study of industrial organizational psychology. And it was at that point where I felt it was like my calling at a still weird young age. I really wanted to make better leaders because I could see what happened when they weren't good, because it affects your life. It doesn't just, you don't leave it at the job, you bring it home to your family. Absolutely. And so it really set me on a path of study and my career to focus on how to make better leaders.
Fantastic. And to think that you got that at an early age of 13. That's really impressive, and no wonder you've been able to accomplish all that you've been able to do. Well done, Therese. So happy to hear that story. Really inspiring. All right, so we have a tradition on this show. We have a fun icebreaker question, and that is, if your career journey were to be a movie, what would the title be? And if you like, tell us why.
Okay. There's probably many movies that are flashing before my eyes, but I think the first thing that comes to my mind is the movie It's a Wonderful Life. And I guess that's what popped in first, not because it was a perfect life or perfect career or an easy journey. It wasn't for me, and I don't think it is for most of us. But I think that sometimes our skills and our resilience is forged during tough times. And, whether that's just, an unexpected career change or, a difficult project. And so overall, I feel that even in my, tough moments along my career journey, that keeping a perspective that it's still a wonderful discovery. I'm still happy to be learning and growing, even on the days when, I didn't want to get out of bed and go to work. It can still be wonderful. So that's my movie.
I love it. Positivity, optimism. I love it. We all need a dose of that, to keep going in today's world. So that's fantastic. Thank you so much. All right. So we are getting into the juicy part of our conversation. I know that our host is ready. Guys, you're going to learn a lot from this session, I promise you. So if you haven't gotten your notepads ready, I'd implore you start doing that right now. So our first core conversation for today is, what does it mean exactly to lead when you're not officially in charge? And how do you define influence without authority?
Yeah, I think it's so relatable for most of us, right? No matter kind of what role we're at, we are faced with the challenge of needing to get things done through others that might be peers. They're not our direct reports. We may not have any direct reports, but we're responsible for getting things done with and through others. And I think that's universal. I don't know many jobs, many careers where, you can just blanketly tell people what to do or make things happen. And so I think, influencing without authority is this reality that we're going to have to get good at knowing how to navigate relationships and knowing how to work with other people who might have different priorities, different, pressures, different motivations. And we have to find a way to be able to help align ourselves to those people so that we can get things done when we don't have any other levers, like, telling people, well, you have to because I'm your boss, or because so-and-so said you need to do it. We have to be able to find our ways to create connection and collaborate well.
Amazing. So I have a follow-up to that question, right? And I know that we have a cross-generation of listeners to our podcast, but I want to address this question to the early career professionals because they tend to struggle with this the most. So how can early career professionals start to cultivate this mindset that even if they are at entry-level roles, they can still lead without having the title?
Well, I think you just pointed out the first mindset. I think the self-talk that we have to have, which is the chatter in our head, right? Most of us talk to ourselves all the time, and it starts there because if your mindset is, it doesn't matter what I say, no one will listen, or it's useless to try to change people's minds, or, who am I? I'm just, starting my career. What do I know? Then that mindset will lead you down the path to not showing up with a lot of confidence or credibility. And earlier on in your career, you want to be able to set a foundation where you may not have all the answers. Yeah, you may not have the power, but you can be in a really good mindset of learning. Like I may not have the answers, but I'm going to get really good at understanding what's the business priority. How is my leader thinking? If I'm having to influence someone else, what's their point of view? And so just shifting your thinking opens you up to getting a lot more information, which then you can use to influence.
Amazing. One key thing that stood out for me there is being open to learning. And I am an advocate of, lifelong learning. So you don't need to have it all together, but the willingness and the readiness to learn can really, help. And it can really go a long way in helping to achieve this. So thank you for sharing that perspective. All right, so let's move to the second question. What are the key characteristics or behaviors that allow someone to show up as a leader in any situation?
I think the first one might sound counterintuitive because most people think, well, you better say something smart. Right? You better know all the facts. You better have all the details. And while that's important to show up as, someone who's knowledgeable, I actually think the place to start is to be a good listener. And it's counterintuitive, right? Because I'm just going to sit back and listen. Well, listening is a very active behavior when it's done well, meaning that you're not just necessarily listening to the facts that people are saying, but you're listening below the surface. So, what's driving someone's point of view, or what are their values or motives? Because when I can understand at a deeper level, I have a better perspective on which I can, make some choices about offering my point of view or making someone feel heard and understood. So listening first is the skill I think that everyone needs as a foundation for leadership. Another skill would be around how you engage with presence. So I was just helping someone who's just starting their career, and they said, when I get nervous, I ramble. Like I feel like I lose my train of thought and I speak a lot and I speak really fast. And one of the things that I'm helping him do is, how do you make your point more concise and crisper so that when you're in rooms with more senior people, that reads as more confident, more of a leadership behavior. So how you engage with presence and listen are the two places I think to start.
Fantastic. Really fantastic points. Active listening, and I didn't see that coming. It's, it's like the best place to start. And, I agree with you. A lot of times, we don't listen. If we can really engage in active listening, just like you have said, I think it's going to make a world of difference. And to the second point that you made, building a presence that, that is unforgettable, leaving that leadership imprint. If you could help us drill down a bit more on that, because I feel like that is like the meat of our conversation today, how people can really show up. So if you could help us share more practical insights as to how people can make that happen for themselves.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the happy news for us all is that I'm not going to give you do's and don'ts, like don't do this or do this, because I think it's much more nuanced. And because executive presence arises from something deeply wired in us as human beings. When we started to walk the earth as human beings, we were looking for signals from other humans to decide who should we follow, because who's going to keep us safe? Who's going to find a source of food? Who's going to protect us? And that deep wiring in us hasn't really gone away. And so in the book, The Facilitation Advantage, we talk about status behaviors. And status behaviors are just these signals that we send to people that indicate that, we're someone who's credible, that we should follow, that we should listen to. And I think the really great part of it is not trying to show up, as higher status than other people. It's to match status with the people that you're interacting with. So for instance, let's say that you are in a meeting and there's more senior people, and maybe you have in this meeting, a status update. Low status behaviors would be something like this. You're not making eye contact. You are rambling. You're, shrugging your shoulders. You're not, showing up, even just how your body language indicates. You're saying things like, well, we're still trying to figure out all the information, or you're asking permission. Would it be okay if we move to the next topic? Now, if you're with senior people, those aren't signals that match behaviors with more senior people. So instead, be doing the opposite, making eye contact. If you get nervous when you speak, pause more, because pausing sends a signal that you're not scrambling for time, even though the clock's ticking and you might only have 5 minutes. But it shows up as you are more confident. Instead of asking permission, you make more of a statement. Let's move to the next slide now. Instead of, is it okay if we move on? Instead of lowering your status by saying, I'm still new and I'm still figuring this out, which lowers your status, you can just say, here's what I know to be true right now. And those are matching your behaviors with people who are more senior. Now, let's say you happen to be in charge of the new summer interns coming in and they, are brand new. Your job there is to match status with them. So you would show up, very commanding, because you're trying to make them feel comfortable. So you might be a little bit more casual, right? You may, ask more questions and so on. So that's this point of that it's nuanced. It's not a do this in all cases or don't do this in all cases.
Amazing. That was really, really good. Thank you so much. All right. So moving on. What's one characteristics you see underutilized in teams that could instantly boost leadership presence?
Inside teams?
Yes.
Well, I think one that happens all the time, think about how many meetings most of us are in all day, more than we'd like. And so I think one is how you operate inside a team. So I'll give you two tips. One is send an agenda before the meeting. And it sounds so simple, but if you look at your calendar and think of how many meetings do I have, and we haven't really defined exactly what we're going to do in this meeting, especially recurring meetings where it's easy to kind of just forget to send out an agenda. That's one way you can start to help a team operate with higher performance. It's just like, let's all get on the same page with what are we trying to solve for in this meeting. A second tip I give you is oftentimes there's a lot of people talking in meetings, but back to listening, not a lot of listening. And so another way that you could infuse leadership into your teams is to be the ear. So for instance, sometimes people are in like violent agreement. They're all saying the same thing, just a different version of the same thing. You could say, you know what, it does sound like we're all in agreement. So let's go to the next topic. You can short circuit moments when teams go round and round and round. And that's just through good listening to be able to notice what's happening in the group and be able to call it out. So those are two things. I'll give you a third one. And that is like watching for body language.
Okay.
Because, most of our communication is nonverbal. And even in virtual meetings, right, you can probably notice the signal when a team member crosses their arms, looks down, rolls their eyes. And oftentimes we just blow past it. But if as a team leader, calling that out and saying, hey, Therese, I wish we were together. What's going through your mind right now is better than blowing past it. Because has this ever happened to you where there's the meeting after the meeting? Like, okay, we had a team meeting and then it ended and then we all find our way into so-and-so's cube to be like, can you believe that? Do they really think that's going to happen? Can you imagine when they said that, right? That's the meeting after the meeting. A good team leader is able to spot the micro behaviors that need to be addressed in the meeting and to create the psychological safety for you to be able to, allow people to say what they need to say without fear of retribution or being, called out.
Fantastic. Really simple, but very effective, I must say. So setting an agenda for meetings shows that you know what you're doing. There is a focus, the reason why you're gathering. I think that's the kind of impression it gives, when you set up an agenda for meeting. And again, active listening showing up for the second time in our conversation today. A lot more people need to listen attentively for things being said and things not said. And lastly, creating that psychological safety where people can really express themselves. That was really practical and useful. Thank you. All right, so moving on, let's talk a little bit about hybrid and remote teams, since they are in today's world, they are becoming more and more common. A lot of organizations are going into hybrid and remote work environment. So what are some trust building skills that leaders can start using today, especially in such environments, hybrid and remote?
Sure. I think that it calls on us to be really good at drawing people out. Whether, maybe half the team is virtual, half the team is in person. And here's what I see a lot. So, leaders will express frustration to me, like, I have to lead this meeting or this presentation, but no one ever talks. It's like, pulling teeth to get people to engage. And I think it's very easy to blame the group, like, oh, because they're virtual or because half of us is virtual and not. But it doesn't really help you in any way to blame the group, because often there's things you could be doing differently to engage hybrid teams and have them more engaged in any kinds of conversations. Here's my one tip. Is the quality of the questions you ask. So for instance, if you want engagement, but your primary question to people after you, let's say, present something is, does anybody have any questions? Any questions? And all you hear is crickets, the silence. It's the quality of that question that's the problem. What do you think when you hear, do you have any questions? What's your opinion when you hear that?
Any questions? Like, it's so vague.
Right.
And it could be, it's not targeted, just open-ended. So
exactly. It's like, any questions about what? About what you started with 10 minutes ago or now? So it's vague. It's hard to answer. And also, we've become so immune to that question. We don't even really believe that you're curious. It's just kind of a throwaway question. And so if you want to engage more virtual teams or hybrid teams, ask a different question, something that's more curious. For instance, you might say, all right, so I've talked a lot about what the plan will be for the next quarter. What do you think we have to do to make sure that happens? Or when you think about all that we have to do in addition to this, how do you think we're going to need to support each other differently? Or what's exciting to you about this plan? So a couple things. One, they're open-ended questions, right? So they require more than a yes or no. But even more than that, it requires people to think like, I guess I wonder how we are going to pull this off with everything else on our plate. Because let's have that conversation now. Because I want to be able to work through obstacles in this meeting, not, hear about it 3 weeks later when people are like, we couldn't get it done because we had all these other things to do. So that would be my number one trick is you've got to be more curious and ask a better question than the simple, do you have any questions?
That's amazing. And I hope our listeners can really hear this. If you can ask more specific questions, you'll get better results. So thank you so much. All right. So our core question number 3 for today. How can professionals build trust and credibility to enhance their influence in teams or organizations?
Yeah. So I think, trust and credibility starts with people seeing you as someone to follow. That they want to engage with you, they want to seek you out. And I think when you distill that down to what practically can I do? I think it's that when people feel that you hear and understand them, they're more likely to tell you more information. They're more likely to involve you. They're more likely to see you as someone that's not just transactional, but someone who is more collaborative and more about team, performance. And so I think that sometimes it's about, we focus a lot on ourselves. How do I look? How did I sound? Did everybody think this was a good thing to say? And if you can turn that focus away from yourself and to other people, and again, notice and listen to verbalizing what are other people saying. It's an instant credibility boost. And here's the great thing, especially if you're early in your career, you don't have to have all the answers. No, first of all, no one does. But 2, sometimes I think we falsely believe that the only way I'm going to be trustworthy and I'm going to be an influential leader is if I have all the answers right. And I think it should be refreshing for you to all know, of course, you have to be developing your domain expertise. But I work with a lot of exceptional technologists, engineers, brilliant scientists. And when they become leaders, they realize it's not enough. They've been solely relying on their domain expertise and understanding of their craft, when they've been overlooking all of these skills of engaging with presence and managing your mindset and listening well and knowing how to run meetings. So if you can learn that early in your career, you're already setting yourself for a good career trajectory.
Amazing. Building credibility. Thank you so much for sharing that thoughts with us. And I'm sure that would resonate with as many as tune into this podcast today. All right. So moving to the 4th question. What communication techniques are most effective for inspiring and guiding others without formal authority?
I think the first thing is that before, let's say you have to give it an update or a presentation, let's say, sometimes it's easy to start with okay, I got to get my slides together. I have to, script it or get my notes together. And I would suggest you start at a different point. And the point you should start at is to step into the shoes of the people you're trying to influence. Really step out of what you need and think about, what are their pain points? What are their concerns? What do they need? What are their priorities? Because if you can start there, then the words you use or the deck of slides, whatever, is going to sync up to what they need instead of just expressing what you need. And if you can just start there, not thinking about how do I get the words right, but what do they really care about? What are their concerns? What are their priorities? Now you're in a better mindset to be able to present or engage with people. And here's the thing. Let's say you're really early in career and you're like, how would I know? I don't interact with this leader a lot.
Exactly what was going on.
Then part of your prep is to go ask other people that question, you know? So it's like, oh, I have to present to, Barbara, but I don't ever have any interaction with Barbara. Okay, well then who do I know that might know Barbara that I could call up or text and just say, hey, what are her biggest pain points or what matters to her around this topic that I'm going to present? And now you can frame your message, your, presentation around that.
Fantastic. So you can leverage people basically. You don't need to have all the answers, but there's someone who knows someone that can give you information and you can prepare well and show up appropriately with all of those information. I love that. So this question is unplanned, but based on your response, is there any role that vulnerability plays in leadership?
Oh gosh, that's such a good question. And 100%. And I think this is back to this false belief that we should show up as perfect and have all the right answers and know exactly what to say. And no one's like that. That's not authenticity for most people. And so I've seen some very, very senior C-suite executives show their vulnerability in a way that made other people that much more connected to them and motivated by them. And it's this reality of, look, no one has a crystal ball. When you can show up as saying, we're still learning. And part of the reason that we have all of you involved is to make even better choices because we have more voices and more points of view. And I just think we crave that in leaders. Wow, okay, no one's perfect. You don't have to express, this ideal state of being perfect. I don't either. And that when you're in an environment where you feel like, okay, I can make mistakes, and as long as they're in the frame of I'm learning, then you're going to continue to take more big, bold moves and risks, and that grows an organization.
Amazing. Again, I have a spontaneous follow-up question to that.
Yeah.
Because I have seen organizations where when there is a mistake, someone's head would have to roll. Someone has to take the fall for it. So in that environment, people try to throw other people under the bus. No one wants to take responsibility. So it's difficult to really be vulnerable in such environments, even as a leader.
Yeah.
So my question is there any role the organizations should play in this, in helping people?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, it's necessary to change a culture of fear to one of innovation and risk-taking. And it has to be tied to what's the business strategy, right? So if the business is trying to innovate and capitalize on AI, for instance, and grow, then you need to reset what does good leadership look like. And the more that's behavioral, so for instance, that a behavior you might want all leaders to demonstrate is that they empower talent. And how do you empower talent? Well, you give them the ability to try things and not be perfect. You give them feedback and positive feedback. You listen and you coach. An organization fundamentally has to create the structures and the frameworks where leaders understand that how they're going to be measured isn't just by the what. So I can be a great salesperson and I might be able to, have the, biggest sales of the year. But if I'm difficult to work with and people don't even want to, when they see me coming, they recoil, they want to, do anything but work with me, that's a problem. Mm-hmm. And so the companies that understand that we've got to measure the what and the how you go about developing people, how you go about encouraging appropriate risk-taking has to be measured, and it has to be part of performance management. Because if it's not, then it's just words on a wall, and everybody knows that's really not the truth about how we operate here.
What role does facilitation play in helping leaders enhance their confidence and influence? Mm-hmm. So you can share highlights from the facilitation, the facilitation advantage, and just give practical examples of how facilitation transforms team dynamics, and stuff like that. Yeah.
Well, here's the big secret. That's not so much of a secret. Everything we've been talking about, me falls under facilitation skills. Because facilitation skills aren't something reserved for like trainers or professional facilitators who come in and run a meeting. They're everyday skills when we have to be able to work with other people. And so in the book, we've uncovered what are the 10 skills. We call them contributions because they're the gifts you bring into any situation or any conversation. And they're a way for you to have a touchstone to where should you be developing. So I think of facilitation as just a series of choices. And the more you have choice when you're caught off guard, you're asked a question you weren't expecting, you have to present in a high stakes situation, the more you have choice of what to do, the better you're going to show up with influence and credibility. So for instance, in any moment, let's say you can see people are starting to lose interest or not stay engaged, you could do a variety of choices. 1, take a break. 2, stop just talking and giving information. Tell a story. So story is one of the facilitation skills because story is sticky. And let's say you're the 8th meeting of the day. Everybody's tired. And you want to give a lot of information and you can notice. So try telling a story. Another choice is stop talking and ask those curious questions. And so the goal of the book is to enable anyone who has to work and collaborate with other people to have clarity on what are the highest leverage things they could be doing to increase their impact. And we have a free tool on the Facilitation Advantage website. It's a self-assessment, and it will give you a quick little read on where should I be focusing? Should I really be focusing on my mindset? Should I be focusing on becoming a better storyteller? Or engaging with presence, or knowing how to adapt my approach for different audiences. So I'm a big fan of not trying to do everything at once because that's overwhelming and everybody's busy. But this website and the free tool can give you a lens into the 1 or 2 things to work on.
Fantastic. I love the progression. So what advice would you give to someone who wants to lead effectively, regardless of their position in an organization?
I think it's to know that you can lead from any seat at the table, and sometimes it's, we think, well, I can't be a leader until I have the title, or I can't be a leader until I have direct reports. And I don't believe that's true. I think that you can have a voice, you can have influence from any seat that you're at. It's going to start with how you see yourself first, and then use the skills from the Facilitation Advantage to be able to show up as a leader.
Fantastic. All right. So I think that brings us to the end of our core questions for today. It's been a fantastic learning opportunity, relearning as well. All right, but before I let you go, so let's quickly take our rapid fire questions. What's a standout leadership moment from your career that inspires you? So this is fun and engaging. 1 word and we can move. What's a standout leadership moment for you from your career? Yeah.
The moments where I was thrown into the deep end of the pool and I, was on the kind of the edge of my knowledge and I had support around me so that I wasn't going to drown.
Amazing. Supports are very helpful and powerful. All right. Do you have a favorite leadership quote or mantra?
I'll take one from a woman that I've worked with for most of my career. She's the founder of a company called Proteus International that I'm an affiliate to. And she taught this to me and I love it. And she said, it's the quote from Michelangelo that I'm still learning. And I just think that if you have a mantra like that, of I'm still learning, then throughout your career and your life, you'll have a positive lens on all the things that happen.
That's powerful. And the last one, what's one leadership book aside from your own that you would recommend for our listeners?
I'll tell you one of my favorites, and it's called Chatter, and it's a book about mindset. It's about how you manage the chatter in your brains, and I think we can all benefit from learning how to master that more effectively.
Fantastic. That brings us to the end of this conversation. Thank you so much, Therese, for sharing such powerful insights today. Your wisdom on leading without authority, building trust, leveraging facilitation is exactly what many of our listeners need to hear right now. So can you tell us how people can connect with you? Yeah.
Sure.
And how they can also grab a copy of your book?
Yes, absolutely. So go to the facilitationadvantage.com. Again, the free self-assessment is there. Also, ways that we can work together, from individual coaching to workshops. And then find me on LinkedIn. Like I said, I'm very active on LinkedIn, and it's a quick way to get maybe a little burst of ideas and practical tips regularly.
Fantastic. So what would be your key takeaway to our listeners today? What will be your final words as we wrap up this session?
Yeah, I think it's back to like you can lead from any spot in the room. You don't have to wait for a title or, direct reports. That you have more capability in you than you might think.
Fantastic. All right. Thank you so much, listeners, for tuning into today's episode. And if today's episode resonated with you, please be sure to share it with a friend and, leave us a review. It helps others to discover the show and grow their careers. And until I come your way again next time, remember, no matter your title, you have the power to lead, inspire, and thrive. And that's it for today's episode of Thrive Careers Podcast. I'm Olajumoke Fatoki, reminding you that no matter where you are in your career, you have the power to rewrite your story. If you've enjoyed today's insights, do not forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with someone who's ready to thrive. If you have questions or topics you would like for me to cover, let's connect. I'd love to hear from you. Remember, clarity creates confidence, and confidence leads to success. Until next time, stay inspired and keep thriving.